is Mark Gunn Media.
Hit it!
Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. I'm your host, Mark Gunn. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and not necessarily reflective of anyone or any entity associated with this broadcast. This episode brought to you by Before Your First Gig, an audiobook written by Steve Dustcircle and produced by Mark Gunn Media. If you're a beginning musician, this is a primer that you'll definitely want to hear. Tips and strategies for setting yourself up for live performances and paid gigs. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Available now on iTunes, Audible.com, and Amazon. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Produced by Mark Gunn Media. This episode, Happiness in Hip Hop, when an album review really isn't an album review. Now, in order to give you proper context about this episode, let me tell you a few things about myself. I'm a 57-year-old IT professional who spent over 30 years as a radio and television personality. In that previous life, I shaped the sounds of several radio stations as a program director. For those of you not exactly sure of what that is, I was largely responsible for the music and other content that you heard on a daily basis. I took music submitted by various record companies and decided if a song was good enough to be added to our playlist. I was actually very good at this because of my also being a musician. I looked at music in a totally different way and earned a reputation for being rather philosophical about it. That approach made me hard to deal with sometimes because I held musicians and their product to a very high standard, still do to this day. This was a running joke among some of my record company colleagues, and at a radio convention, they actually gave me the, quote, most philosophical award for that year. Others in the industry took me very seriously because of my track record when it came to predicting which songs would become hits. In fact, I was the runner-up in a national contest conducted by a respected radio trade magazine. In short, I know a hit when I hear one. This is why, some 5 years after leaving the business, there are musicians that still seek my opinion. Only now it's called being a consultant, meaning that I actually get paid for my thoughts. Underneath all of that, I've always been a fan of many different genres of music. My dad, William, has always been my biggest influence as a musician, a multi-instrumentalist who played all kinds of music. As a child, it wasn't unusual to hear Aretha, rest in power, Queen, alongside the Beatles, Charlie Pride, and Beethoven at any given time. As I got older, my taste in music gravitated more toward rock, hip-hop, and R&B. I remember my late Uncle Junior turning me on to folks like Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets, two of whom I consider to be the earliest progenitors of what we now know as hip-hop. Along came the Sugar Hill Gang, and that was that. Like so many kids of my age, I was hooked. Skilled wordsmiths telling stories over familiar samples from back in the day. Now, in addition to my exposure to all those musical styles, I was also made keenly aware of everything happening in the civil rights movement and subsequently the Black Power movement. Both would play a major role in my evolution as a man and as a fan of hip-hop. In my 20s, the quest for knowledge of self began in earnest. I soaked up all the teachings of Malcolm, Martin, Muhammad, and Farrakhan, to name a few. James Baldwin was, and still is, must-read material. I also immersed myself in some of the world's religions. I was brought up as a Baptist, but began studying what I would later learn to be, at that time, a perversion of Islam under Elijah Muhammad and the NOI. The catch-22 was that the nation was doing incredible work as it related to the redemption of black people. But the hypocrisy was more than I could take. Now, how can a religion that's designed to raise up the black man be responsible for murdering one of its most important champions? When Malcolm broke away from the NOI and began to expose them, it cost him his life. After learning that, I began seeking more qualified teachers. I found them while hosting an event honoring Muslim community leaders in San Francisco. I participated in the call to prayer and spent time talking with the imam who presided over the ceremony. Islam also played an important part of my musical growth. Thinking about it, as a musician, my path to a different genre of rap was already laid out before me. As I learned more about our history, I needed a soundtrack of sorts. That's when Public Enemy came into my life. my favorite rap group of all time. As someone seeking a hidden truth, I still curse what passes for the American school system for what Carter G. Woodson called the miseducation of the American Negro. Public Enemy and other socially conscious rap groups provided much-needed historical context through some of the most thought-provoking rhymes ever written. A far cry from the bitter irony of rap being a spoken-word art form, now reduced to so-called rappers that couldn't care less about the importance of words, or even speaking in some cases. As a musician who would later become a producer, I gained two musical heroes in Keith Shockley and Eric Sadler, known back then as the Bomb Squad. To this day, I do not think that there are any better producers in hip-hop, and there are some really great ones. As I continued to embrace pro-blackness in music, I looked for more musical food. Boogie Down Productions, X-Clan, Kool Moe Dee, Ice Cube, Post-NWA, and an artist who remains criminally underrated to this day, the Bay Area's Paris, all became part of my diet. As you see, my standards were pretty high. Fast forward a few years and a few radio stations later, I began to lament what I saw as the dumbing down of Black America, and I began to blame black radio for its complicity. Here's a little inside baseball for you. As consolidation ran rampant throughout the industry, that's when media companies could buy as many stations as legally allowed by the FCC. The overall quality began to suffer. Local programming gave way to syndicated shows as cost-cutting measures, and lots of really talented people lost jobs. Musically, the product had gotten worse. Over a 10-year period, we'd gone from lyrical content that was empowering to content where lyrics simply didn't matter. We went from embracing being queens and queens to being niggas, bitches, and hoes as badges of honor. As a program director, it became increasingly difficult to present product that was good for the community and maintain the original spirit of black radio. Thanks to the loads of talented people I worked with, we succeeded in spite of the garbage being presented by the record labels. Mind you, there were some real flashes of brilliance, but pro-blackness in hip-hop had been deliberately murdered by the record industry. Over the last few years, the effects of dumbing it down have become even more apparent. Black radio, for the most part, simply isn't as smart as it used to be. Because of the significant lack of ownership by people of color, along with a mindset that dictates that personalities stick to a very narrow set of guidelines, content is limited to celebrity nonsense, the latest hip-hop beef, and advice on relationships from people who have absolutely no business giving it. Nothing of any real substance. With very few exceptions, stations are out of their depth when it comes to dealing with real issues because personalities simply aren't trained or encouraged to think outside of the box. Hip-hop, for the most part, suffers from the same malaise. If someone had told me 10 years ago that mumble rap artists like Migos and Lil Yachty, along with a few others, would be the be-all, end-all of rap right now, I would have laughed them out of my office. What passes for music these days wouldn't have made it past the first 2 bars of any of it that I would have listened to. Yeah, it's a generational thing, and yes, I am a musical snob. Remember, I am a second-generation musician. One of the insidious side effects is in the way that quite a few of our kids express themselves. They've become as dumbed down as the music they listen to. They're victims of what I call giggo, garbage in, garbage out. Unfortunately, they don't have the advantage of having the musical heroes and heroines that we had back in the day. Thank God for the Kendrick Lamars, the D1s, and the Childish Gambinos of the world, just to name a few. They give me hope for the future of the culture. And then there's Eminem. For my money, one of the greatest rappers of all time. Why would he be important to this conversation? I'll tell you why after this. This episode brought to you by thelocalplug502.com, a comprehensive website designed as a guide to a Louisville you may not know about. The best places for food, drinks, and fun, all off the beaten path. Thelocalplug502.com was designed by a professional in the hospitality industry, so you get the real deal when it comes to places to go and things to do. This ain't your local boring Chamber of Commerce website. So if you really want to get to know the city, or if you plan on coming to Louisville anytime soon, check out thelocalplug502.com. If you're an advertiser, one of the most important things about getting your message out is actually standing out from the rest of the crowd. If you're listening to this program right now, this is where you'd hear your commercial. As an exclusive sponsor of Gunshots Straight from the Hip, your commercial is professionally produced and gets a longer shelf life based on your needs. Gunshots Straight from the Hip is a unique and compelling program unlike anything else in the marketplace. Episodes are available for download on iTunes, TuneIn, and MarkGunMedia.com. And depending on how you tailor your message, the potential for new and repeat customers is that much greater. Best of all, it's extremely cost-effective. If you'd like more information on how you can be a sponsor of this broadcast, call Mark Gun Media, Inc. at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Or log on to markgunmedia.com. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. We're talking about happiness in hip-hop, when an album review isn't an album review. Now, before the break, I was talking about the overall dumbing down of hip-hop in the culture and the reemergence of Eminem. On August 31st, he dropped a surprise album called Kamikaze, one of the most brutal diss albums I've heard in quite some time, in which he goes after today's generation of so-called rappers. Now, the album has a lot of hip-hop heads and folks in the mainstream talking. Some folks are praising it as brilliant, others giving serious critiques, and there are those that think he may have gone a little too far. One quote that I saw on Twitter read, "Trying to figure out if Eminem just revived rap or straight killed it for everyone else, ever," end quote. I, for one, give profound thanks to Marshall Mathers for releasing one of his better projects over the years. But that's not what this podcast is about. What I really am thanking him for is the reaction to the album. If you go to YouTube, you'll see videos of people breaking down each track. Now, what brings a smile to my face is what I'm hearing and seeing from these 20-somethings of all ethnicities. Every reaction video I saw, every one, gave very detailed and intelligent analysis of the Eminem Kamikaze project. Nothing I heard was dumbed down in the least. I saw young kings and queens speaking their truth, speaking passionately about what they saw as the return of real hip-hop. Now, these are the kids that weren't affected by the mumble rap-minded nincompoopness that Eminem goes off about on Kamikaze. I found myself watching these reaction videos for hours, smiling and laughing the entire time. Now again, I'm not endorsing the album. That's for you to check out. I am encouraging you to check out some of these reaction videos. These young men and women are brilliant, and they make me happy to see some intelligence when it comes to hip-hop. Shout out to the fellas at Dissect University. Their video was one of my favorites. Now, the only other thing that I would hope for is that these same kings and queens use the same intelligence, the same energy, the same passion to share their views on more critical matters. Now, we're less than 2 months away from some very important November midterm elections. How will they react to that? You've been listening to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and not reflective of any business entity or anyone associated with this broadcast. If you have any comments or want more information on how to be a sponsor, log on to our website at markgunmedia.com or call us at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Thank you for listening.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.